put it that well.
Hello, hello, hello! It is the Dungeon Minister. And first of all, thank you to Bill at PML for hosting today this panel. He has far more tech equipment and tech savvy than I have. I would have just put my phone propped up against a coffee cup. And that probably wouldn't have done terribly well. We have an illustrious panel of gamers, hobbyists, and YouTube sensations and podcast heroes here today. I'm just going to quickly go down because, especially with the podcasting folks, you have no idea what they look like. You can even pretend that they're each other today. But I'm going to go down the line. I've introduced myself. And go on down and let the good folks know who you are.
Bear the Gen X GM.
The Old Geek.
Sean with Mage's Musings.
Kevin with Red Caps Podcast.
Todd from Hex Press.
Daniel, Let's Keep.
And I'm John from Tales of Magical.
And these are some of the folks who are here at Clericon this year who are providing some games and their general awesomeness to the room. There are many others. Pretty much everyone here when it comes down to it. This year, the panel discussion question, the topic is essentially how many rules does a game need? How many rules do you actually need for a role-playing game? And we'll start at that wide open generality and see if we get any more specific as we go. So, I open it to the panel. How many do you need to play a role-playing game?
7.
7.
Yeah.
Can you list them for us?
No, God.
So that would randomly
Yeah,
choose an answer.
7 seems like a good number of rules to have. What do you think, Sean?
I'm partial to 8.
Oh, well. Sectarianism already.
No, I mean, facetiousness aside, I think you need the ones you need the ones that work, and you need the ones that make the game fun. If the rules are stopping the game from being fun, you now have too many rules. That's what I'd say.
Now, Sean and I were talking earlier about the pretty big gulf between the old BASIC, which is my jam, and AD&D. That AD&D has the capacity to get extraordinarily crunchy, and that for some people, that's the fun. Like they want to do math. Like that's like yes, you know. And for me, I did very badly at math in school. So as little math as I can get away with. If you played in my game last night, you may have noticed.
That's because you didn't play enough AD&D.
I didn't, that's why I'm so bad at math. I'm so bad at math. But there's a level at which, as you said, Bear, there's a level at which the rules start to get in your way. There's also a level at which the lack of rules can get in someone's way.
Well, yeah, you get a double. I think everybody would probably agree on this. There can be a level of analysis paralysis that can occur when there's too many rules, and when it's wide open, you get a similar effect for the lack of guidance and the lack of rules. People are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. So they want to be having something tell them what to do or give them some options. Now I know the old school disagrees with me on this. That's fine. Won't be the first time we disagree. But I think when you hit your sweet spot for your table, you could play AD&D, streamlining all the rules you want. Sean could play AD&D, adding every rule he wants to put in there. And as long as you both your tables are having fun, you've got the exact right amount of rules. That's what I would say, hopefully. Anybody down at that end of the table want to jump in?
Well, I'm a basic guy too. I'm a basic guy, and I play basic D&D. But I have to admit, when I was younger and I left basic for advanced, I had no intention of going back, and I definitely thought more was better. I've come back to basic now because with the audio medium, less is more. The less I have to explain, the easier it is for the audience to follow and be with me and sort of keep track of things. So I guess for me, it sort of depends on your medium. Are you at a table? Are you producing a show? That kind of thing. So I don't know that there's one answer to cover every situation.
I think a good question is, what is a rule? Because for me, the number of rules really depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. You should only have as many rules as what you need to do the task. Yeah. Having a rule that describes how long you can hold your breath in a cave 6 miles underground and your entire adventure or your entire game is played inside a city probably isn't of use to anybody. So if you have rules that are catered towards the game and the players that you've got, keeping that tight, I think it's a great number of rules. And if you don't have a rule and the situation comes up, then that rule gets created at that time. And as long as you keep it consistent, I don't see a problem with creating it from nothing.
Well, primarily, the rules are conflict resolution too,
Yes.
because you are creating the physics of the world with dice, so you need something to govern all that. And ultimately, you're going to have the conflict resolution for the situations you're going to be using. That's why combat rules are always so very specific.
That tends to be where that first set of rules you
Right.
put together if you're developing a game is how do I kill someone?
Right. And most of the games,
Not just
not most, but- yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the games are based around that.
Yeah, it's true, but so if you look at something like OD&D, which I've been running, it specifically calls out that a fighter should protect the magic user because they are weak. How do you do that? There's no rules for that. How do you do it? In fact, can the fighter protect the magic user? How do you do that? Is there a rule for that?
Yes, no, like other than I'll stand in front of him.
Right,
Yeah.
so does there need to be a mechanic that says that? And I think for some tables, there does. Because if I say, I want to protect the magic user and I'm a fighter, the DM could say, well, they just shoot the ball right past you, or you're
Yeah.
standing there, who cares?
Yeah.
Whereas, so some people will require those rules because the table hasn't agreed that they're on the feel of the game, right? And this is where I think you need the rules. If you're playing with a group that can't agree, then this is where you have to have the rule, right? And I think that comes down to talking about things, seeing how it plays out, right? And ultimately, somebody has to make that decision and say, this is you can or can't do it. And that usually falls on the DM. And some DMs don't want that responsibility, right? They'd rather say, oh, no, let me get Pathfinder out. Oh, yeah, there's a feat for that, block enemy target, and they're happy with that. They don't have to be the person that says, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that, so now your character's dead. So it kind of, I almost feel like the rules have to do with how comfortable you are with just making that like really neutral decision as a referee and saying, I'm gonna do what's logical here. And if you can't do that, or you're unable to do it, you don't comfortable doing it, then you need a rule to fall back on, so you can go, the rule says, this is what it is. I used to write, when I first started playing again, literally I'd write in my notes what the enemy would do based on stuff that I thought the players might do, so I wouldn't feel bad when I was like, well, they capture you. See, it says it right here. It says right here. Right? Because I didn't want to just say, they capture you.
Even though you're the one who wrote it down.
Because it's written down, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it makes me feel comfortable that I'm stepping away from it. The same reason why people want to roll dice, right? It's like, can I do this? And you're unsure, you're like, roll a die, right? And that becomes, not necessarily, maybe that's ruling if you want to get complicated, but I think that's where we need them. We need the rules when we're not comfortable with making the decision, and that the table is not comfortable with us making the decision.
And this is what we saw with the evolution, especially in D&D, we got to third edition, sorry, Sean.
Sure.
When we got to third edition,
Right.
we had so many years of going from old D&D where it was make it up as you go, make a calling, roll a die. First edition, second edition, well, now let's introduce some kinky stuff. Third edition, my players are fed up and they're tired of me making rulings, so here's a bloody rule for everything. And then if you didn't think that was good enough, along comes Pathfinder to go hold my drink, as it does even more. But at the same time, as we saw that evolution of gaming happening, we saw Fate come along. We saw other games that came along that just reduced the amount of rules and went back, and then we saw the old school revolution happen. We saw OSR hit. We saw the idea of OSE, specifically Old School Essentials, becoming the old way of playing. Again, it's gotta be like you said, what you're comfortable with, what your people at the table wanna play with, and that's the end of that. Sadly, we do tribalize over it, and that's when it gets ugly and uncomfortable for people, and we don't realize it. When we do this tribalization, we are driving people away from our hobby. Because they feel like they just walked into a record store, and the guy on the band they like sucks. And you should buy the doors out. So we gotta really, really be aware of what we're doing, make sure our tables are good, and make sure that we are ambassadors for our hobby. Because if we're not, no one else will be.
100%.
Yeah.
Correct.
What's a rule that you have to get rid of, Todd?
Rule I have to get rid of?
Like if you think, you and I both play BX quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is there a rule that is written down that you kind of disregard, or a system that's in BX that you don't use because it just doesn't fit your typical groups?
I have gotten away from Death at Zero. Only because I like the concept of dying and the kind of decisions it forces someone to make if somebody's dying but they're not dead.
Yeah.
And there's been some really fun things that have happened when someone's like, well, they're not dead, but they're dying. So try to help them or let them die. But now that becomes something. Whereas before it was just, well, they're dead, and it was just a very simple, almost non-decision.
Yeah.
And I find that with things like poisons also, I want the poison to kill you still, but I want to kill you slowly. So now they have to think about, can we stop the poison? As opposed to it just being a foregone conclusion. So those kind of instantaneous, it's just over, I've tried to do more of, no, I want to build that tension. I want it to take some rounds. I want you to be hovering around, coughing and wheezing and spitting up blood and bile and seeing if the party can figure out.
Not you
how to save
personally, Kevin.
Not me personally.
Is this because you want your players to have a false hope?
Well, because I'll play it that if they could find something, you know, if we're out, so one of the first times I threw out these poison rules, right, I was in a cave, there were little spiders, dropped down, bit one of the players, they're dying. Now, my thought was, well, now they have a chance. They came out in this forest where the cave was, and they wanted to do a Lord of the Rings, I'll find Athalas. I would have let it, like, go, let's do it, let's find it. What they ended up doing was dragging the guy out and left him to die and went back in the dungeon. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But, you know, I wanted that option to be there, and it made for a moment, because then that guy's hireling was there, saw that the group had left his master, his employer, to die alone by the fire, so he left. And he became a mini villain in the campaign because the party did not take kindly to him leaving. He took what he thought was his fair share of treasure and a horse and left, and they hated that. So they were after him after that. And this whole thing was created just because it went from, okay, he's just dead, to he's in this kind of half state. So I guess that would be one thing that I did that I like for myself.
Well, I have a question, let's all ask Todd questions. So, right, first of all, to answer part of the question about that is, I think it's because it mimics the fiction. If you're watching a Western and the guy gets bit in the leg with the rattlesnake, they can do something, right? They wrap something around the leg, they cut off the thing. And that should be in the game, right? So that's why I like that too. But to Todd's point, if you have new players, do you let them know they have a chance? Like, do you hint at them? Would you stop? I guess it could be anybody, really. It's like, they're brand new, because I know the players are relatively new, right? At this time, I don't know if they were at that point, but they're bit by the poison, you're dying, and they just look at you and like, what can we do? Would you like say, you could try to go in the woods and find something?
Oh, yeah.
Or would you just say, figure it out, buddy?
I mean, I think for definitely new players, I want to let them see the possibility. Because that's kind of, I mean, from the old school perspective of the OSR thing, right? That's what we want people to do. We don't want them to look at the sheet. We want them to say, you're in this world, right? So I want you to say, hey, you can try to do something. I don't know what that thing is. I'm not going to say go find an herb. It could be, yeah, it could be cut off his arm to save him. It could be something like that. But I want you to do it. So I'll let you know the possibilities, but I'll try to do it in kind of a neutral way. So I'm not trying to guide you, because it doesn't matter to me what happens,
Right.
but, you know, hey, you've got options, if you think of them. And but they were like, nah, back into the caves, let's go.
That's always tricky when there are potential things that they could do, and a person living in that world would reasonably know it's an option. They've heard of healing herbs and plants, etc., which we in a modern society thinking, well, there's no hospital, there's no, you know, there's no Shoppers Drug Mart, there's no pharmacy available, I guess that's it, he's dead. But they would assume they have knowledge of things in the world. And that's always the trick with the DM, to lay out the options without, remember the Scooby-Doo cartoons? You could always tell if the phone was going to ring because it stood out for background, because they did one plate for the background and another plate for anything that moved, right? So you'd know which door was gonna open because it was a different color, remember all the others.
Surely it's our job as DMs to try and seed those options in
Yeah.
beforehand.
And that's a delicate thing though, because you're like, and there's a plant growing which
Well,
seems to have a sort of
The way
minty
I
smell.
like that is the same way that I kind of prompt people to run away, is I have the monsters or the NPCs in the world do that action first. So if you're in a fight and the enemies get overrun, I have them run away, so that they see that, oh, you can run away from a fight.
Yeah.
And try to seed at that same option. I think if you can, the more times you have that happen in your world of things that could come up that show the player that anything is actually possible, I think you can get away from that hole. But yeah, you're right. There has to be some level of DM prompting, like anything's possible until you get that. I don't want to say beaten into the players, but kind of beaten into the players.
Soaked into
Well,
it.
so as the dirty, filthy story gamer of the panel,
I'm evolving into it.
I'm teaching you well,
I
I
know you
know.
are, yeah.
I firmly do not subscribe to the school of, well, you can't suggest things to your play. What is this? No, it's a community story. We're telling it together. We're doing it as a group. hey, your body's dying. Anybody want to do anything? Well, what can I do? I don't know. You lived on a farm. Remember that time Becky the cow got bit by the snake? What'd you do then? We cut off Becky's leg. How'd You know, like you can lead them through narration. You don't have to just be like, I don't know, figure it out, good luck, guys. And that's sort of a thing. We need to make it more collaborative, or at least I feel the need to make it more collaborative, so that way it evolves, because I don't want to have, unless I'm running Cyberpunk, I don't want to have a pile of dead character sheets on my desk. I want to actually see the players have fun, go places, achieve things, and enjoy their story together.
We don't do this for fun.
Dirty, filthy story games.
I share a pet peeve,
Yeah.
is if you guys go on Reddit, I know on the OSR, we all love to make our own version of a game, typically our own version of BX that has 3 house rules. But if you jump onto Reddit at any point in time, or Twitter, or wherever else you go for conversations, you will see somebody say, hey, insert shiny new game, often OSE if people are coming in and finding it for the first time. What are the best house rules? And I hate that question, because the best house rules are the ones that you find at your own table that are for your players.
Yeah.
Todd's idea is awesome. Does it work at everybody's table? No. Should everybody just take it and put it on their table? No. If you, the typical poison, safe versus poison or you die, doesn't work at your table, then maybe find and solve that problem. But taking other people's house rules and just dropping them in because it's new and shiny, it's as if you were modding a video game, doesn't really work. You're solving other people's problems that may have nothing to do with you. And I think playing the game, not so much rules as written, I'm not that sort of a guy, but playing the game as it is and then tweaking it as you need to is a much stronger way than hodgepodging a whole bunch of other rules that nobody really thought were going to go together in the first place.
Right, but learn the basic game
Yeah.
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get some system mastery before you start messing around with it, right? I mean, come on.
Often, you'd be surprised how often I get the, hey, I just found this game, what's the best house rules?
Yeah, no, I believe you, I'm just
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
but like, okay, so it's like animation, it's
Yeah,
like when you
it's-
see an animator who understands human anatomy, and then they exaggerate it, the character still looks like a human, because they understood the basic anatomy.
Yeah.
When you see people who don't understand anatomy draw, the characters are uncanny valley creepiness, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing for the game. Know the game you're running, and then modify the game. And I think that's something we gotta teach people, if they're not doing it now.
But this is the I want it now generation. They want to go to the
I got
Reddit
it.
and say, kids, these guys fixed the game, so I'm going to play it this way.
Old men yelling.
I prefer to yell at gray hair.
I mean, it's funny because we talk about the nuance and all the little rules, and that's why the game Pathfinder came about, is because people had trouble coming up with rulings. Well, I don't know how to deal with a snake bite. So now we need a rule that covers that, and suddenly the pendulum swings, and we have games that have rules for everything, and they get bogged down.
Absolutely.
And then people get fed up with that, and it swings back, and look, OSC's popular, because there's no rules.
Part of that kind of jam is auteur trap, right? Because if I fall into the trap of thinking that I'm guiding this amazing experience and I'm the master chef, then everything has to be just so. And it's harder to be loosey-goosey with things. Whereas if I'm kind of letting myself be, well, I'm just gonna see where that die rolls and we're all gonna know together, and then it happens, then I don't have that pressure, kind of like Daniel was saying. I don't, but if I'm like, no, I'm making this particular story of my own creation happen, then it makes everything else a prisoner of that, which I think is often to the detriment.
I will agree with you on that, but there is a middle ground, and I'm always saying this is the thing I rant about on my channel. There is a middle ground between sandbox and railroad, and if we could just go to that middle ground, we'll see that a lot of people are having fun.
Sandy Railroad.
The sandy road, the rail box, whatever you want to call it. And the rail box actually sounds like a good name for a bar. But the point being is that you can actually have narrative, have story, have all those things, but react to the player's choices in how they interact with those moments, and then apply the sandbox mentality of, well, you didn't go stop the hobgoblins. That didn't mean the hobgoblins stuck their thumb up their bum. They went and raided the city, and now you gotta deal with a hobgoblin army of the city as opposed to just stopping that one thing. You can get that. You can build the story, and together you can have the great epic adventures. Because at the end of the day, if you just wanna see how badly halflings and hobgoblins can fight each other, bust out chainmail, bust out whatever miniatures games you like, and roll the dice.
Daniel, you ready?
I'm ready, let's do it.
I've got my token hobbit right here.
Going back
Are we
to the
gonna
main
get all LARP it
topic.
out now, is that the next step?
Going back to the main topic of rules, I think the key is that, I mean, as Bear has already said, we are here to try and help this new generation come in as much as possible, and we should. We should try to introduce people to games wherever possible.
Yeah.
But I think and it's been mentioned again that people are to dive in and add extra rules, add extra layers of complexity. It's very important, I think, that newcomers to the hobby start with something simple, then learn the complexity, and then as you become an old git like us, you realise that the complexity isn't necessary. We then gain the confidence through experience to pull back and go loosey-goosey. Because we understand the framework, we've been there, we've done that, we've experienced the mass of rules and the effect it can have. And it might sound a little elitist, but I think as you get older and as you mature, you tend to drift backwards towards a more natural style of gaming, which is a lot more minimalist, but a lot more creative. And I prefer it that way. I will say that now, I prefer it that way.
Do you think, though, it's because you know all the rules from the other systems? Like, you played a lot of games.
I don't.
You know? No, what I'm saying is, if you played a lot of games, do you think it becomes easier to make the decisions?
Yeah.
Because I wonder if that's it too. Like, you will say it's almost like you're starting, you start basic, then you learn all these rules. You have them in your head, so you don't need a system that has it, because when the odd thing about breathing underwater comes up, you remember that you played Pathfinder, and there was a rule, so you make that work with your. But if you've never played a game with breathing underwater, then you have the people going, well, actually, and like, where do you go, right? So having played games with rules can help you make the rulings, right, in the
Absolutely.
future.
And the simple fact is, I mean, the whole point, the question was, how many rules do we need? In order to roleplay, you don't need any rules. In order to make it into a game,
Right.
that's when rules come in.
Yeah.
The amount of rules you need purely depends on what type of game you want to play, what type of scenario you want to run through, what sort of effect you want to achieve, and whatever the table is happy with. There is no clear answer how many rules do we need. It's as many as are needed in order to create the game we want.
No, I still default to 7.
I think seven's
I was
fine.
gonna say, I think seven's probably good.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good, I mean, it's a good distinction though, I mean, for the, also what Bear's talking about, and you call yourself the dirty.
Dirty, filthy story.
Dirty, filthy story gamer, thank you. Because you can sit at, and Becky's got rules, it's got, but I have had sessions where we've sat down and haven't rolled dice at all, and a lot of fun has still had, there's a story moves forward, and it's character driven, the players are making the decisions on where they're going and reacting and things like that. I think if they did that every week, they'd start to wonder, are we ever gonna do any combat? Are we gonna do something? And so that's why I think that balance is so
Well, dirty, filthy story gaming doesn't mean you don't have
no,
fights.
yeah,
You
you
have
still have
lots of
fight, yeah,
fights.
yeah. Still have
And you
combat.
try your damnedest to kill these bastard players.
Sorry.
I don't know what happened between the two of you last night, but did you go to the
Oh,
pub
no, this
together?
is from our Codex
Oh,
game that we
very
play
good.
online. It's a long building.
Excellent.
I have created a character in that who's not very likable, shall we say.
To anyone in the group. But anyway, that's not what we're here about, I guess.
And that'll prompt a new rule. John is not allowed to do X because.
Because I wrote it down ahead of time.
Damn it, I got 8 rules there. Yeah, I wrote it down, exactly.
One of the things, John, down there, John, listening to Tale of the Manticore, rule that you, I think, added, I've never heard of it anywhere else before, is at leveling up. Your characters have a possibility of their stats increasing.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is really cool, because as they get more experienced, they can get stronger, they're getting more intelligent, they're it's probably the best one of it all is wisdom. The more they,
Right.
that might be a 1d4 you should go with, right? Because that you gain wisdom. But then I sat down to do that, and the dice are the dice, right? And I rolled, and there were like 4 6s. Like, wow, this guy really got good fast, We didn't end up adopting it because at the table I was at, with the people who were playing with, they said, well, let's try it, and they did it. It was like 4 6s, and well, yeah, I guess that could happen. But it's an interesting,
I guess I've been doing that one for 4 years now, and you got lucky. You got really lucky.
Yeah, that was- yeah.
I don't think that's happened to me once in 4 years. It actually does kind of level out.
Right.
But it's a good example of just like, it's a rule, it's not like one of the best rules. It's just a rule that, I tried it, I liked it, I've tried some and dumped them too.
Yeah.
It's just, it comes down to taste, doesn't it, and the people at your table.
It does, and I think in that particular situation too, it is what people have been saying, it depends on the table of the game. In a solo storytelling, like you're playing the game to generate the story, to generate the podcast, that is an easier place for that kind of mechanic to land.
Yeah, character arc makes sense
Yeah.
in what I'm doing. It might not make sense in a one-shot.
Right, and well, and if you're even in a campaign where you want to always have that omnipresent, oh yeah, your podcast is certainly is an omnipresent possibility of death, but that there's always this notion of uphill struggle or whatever. The idea that no, your stats are your stats, and you're going to work with those for an open game that's probably in a lot of cases works better. But in your situation, as you say, character arc, it made all the sense in the world. And it's such a neat mechanic, you know. So I was like one of those guys who what's the best home brew rule, you know, because I thought, oh, that's cool, we should do that. And then again, it was, ooh, wow.
Do you have an ability to lose the stats too?
I don't have that in there, but I could see it working.
Yeah,
For me, it's just a kind of a way for characters to become more powerful in a way that makes narrative sense.
Right.
Quick question, for those of us who don't know what this is,
Oh.
could you explain it to
Oh,
us,
yeah,
please?
sure. So it's a house rule. I don't even remember where I picked it up. I didn't come up. At level up, you just take for every stat down the line, you roll a d6, and if you get a 6, that stat goes up by 1 point.
Okay.
So if you had a 10 in strength and you roll a 6, oh, it's an 11. I
Okay.
guess I got stronger by my experience.
Right. Okay.
Swinging a sword all the
Yeah,
time. And,
I try and justify it in story if it's possible.
There's been similar rules for, Dragonbane has rules that when you go to level up a ability, you have to roll over what that ability score is.
Right.
And if you do, you can bump it up 1. And that way, when it starts to reach the upper limits, it's
harder.
harder,
Yeah,
harder to roll.
Black
over.
Pudding does that. Black Pudding in his
Yeah.
DX hack, you roll a d20 versus one of your, so you pick one.
Right.
And then you roll the d20, and if you're higher, it goes up by one.
Well, that's how skill gain works in basic
Yeah,
role playing.
basic role-playing.
Basic role playing. Any skill you've used,
Yeah.
you then make a check, and if you fail on that check, which means if you roll over, you gain a small margin.
Yeah, that's how Dragonbane does it too. Any critical successes or critical failures you get on any of your skills, whatever stat is associated with that skill, you can have a chance to roll over.
Oh, that's nice, I like that.
So it's a neat way of keeping it going.
Well, you know what's interesting about this is, then it comes back to the rules. Like, I guess it really depends on how important the stats are in the rules.
Yeah.
Right, because if your stats don't do much, or they do a ton, that's gonna matter if they can go up fast or slow, right? If the stats are super important, and you're going up constantly, that's gonna change the game, right? Versus
Yeah.
having them go up, or not go up, or go down. You know,
So
like,
yeah, in your world, in OD&D, the stats are almost meaningless.
right, the stats don't do much in OD&D, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't matter if your stats went up or down as much, right? But in like, I guess, probably in VX they matter even more than AD&D, right? Because in AD&D you gotta have higher stats to really have bonuses. In VX they're pretty fast, right? They're like,
Yeah.
you know, you +3, right away you get a +1 at like 13.
+1 is 13,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it would kind of matter. Oh, I talk loud. Ah, project.
So
yeah,
this
I
puts us
guess
in a
that
position
matters.
where the rules then should reflect the experience the game is trying to give,
Right.
right? So as we say, any rule that does not give that experience, afuera, you know, bye-bye. We'll see it another time, let's not worry about it. Let's worry about the rules that are facilitating the effect we want, the experience we want, or the genre we want. Like, I'm running a superhero game, unless you're trying to buy a building for your super team, I don't care how much money you have,
Yeah.
because it's not going to affect anything.
Well, Peter Parker.
Well, yeah, but that's just gonna be a motivating drive, so that could be a disadvantage, for example, right? So it's not a mechanic.
Yeah.
Right?
Or queens, I guess, kings and queens.
Plus in Beckby too, you know, because the BX Beckby, the XP is tied to gold. By like 3rd level, you can buy pretty well anything.
A country.
You know, short of a castle, you know, can we afford a catapult? Have 10. You know, you get all the money in the
And
world.
that's why AD&D has very punitive living expense rules, they will drain, and training rules, so
Yeah, the
you made a
training
big
rules,
haul, and suddenly you train to get to level 2, and you're broke again, you have to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
So it was a compensation for that probably, you know, it's like.
But there's
okay.
a rule that drives the experience. That training rule, that sucking of your resources forces you to go back up.
Go back
So
up.
that's an effective rule, right?
Well, now, here's the question, though, so two things. First of all, we said that I agreed with it, that your stats don't do much in OD&D. That's actually not true. They don't do much mechanically, but if you read the stats, it says strength is for lifting heavy things, for opening trap doors. There's just not a rule in
Exactly.
mechanics. So is it a rule that the strength helps when you lift a trap door, but it doesn't give you mechanics, right? So that's one thing. And then the AD&D thing's kind of funny too, because is that a reaction to people going, I don't know what to do with this money? So I don't know what to do. Please, Gary Gygax, tell me how to take the money from, believe me, my players are broke in OD&D. I don't need training. But again, it comes down to your table.
Yeah.
And also, is it compensating for the bloat of gold that you're getting, right? Because if you had just said, let's just divide the gold you're getting by half or 20, so instead of being thousands of gold to gold levels, it's hundreds of gold. Then a lot of those rules, maybe those rules aren't really necessary, but it's literally because of one decision, then you have to create a rule that then compensates for the decision that you could have just probably just undone the first decision, but you know.
Right, now
You
that
can't
puts us into
change-
house rules, right? So now we're getting into the house rule thing, which is where we fix the stuff we don't like.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting there, though, is it's right. What I was saying is you're creating more rules to fix, air quoting, a broken rule or a rule you don't like, as opposed to changing, because that's something different, right? House rules are both things. It's changing rules and it's adding rules. It's interesting to see where different people take it. If you want the more crunch, you want more detail, you want your world to be a certain way, you're adding rules. If you want it to be simpler, you can just simply say, like Todd said, well, everybody, it's, divide your experience points by 10, and we just keep the rule the way it is, and then you're done, right? And then- so it's two different experiences. So it's kind of interesting, like what direction you take.
Well, Sean doesn't believe in any of this because he plays AD&D raw.
Well, there you
It is the best game, actually.
go. Well, of course.
I can't help when I hear the raw thing, thinking it's somehow something a priest ought not to be engaging in. Rules is written.
Raw dog them rules.
So tell me about this feeling you have about raw. Just as a sort of a final thing, and I know this could probably go on for hours if we really got dug into it, but what is it that brings you to the system that you play now? And if you play like 18 of them, with the one that is your go-to, your bread, your butter, what is the thing that brings you to that game? Why do you like that edition, that rule set, that whatever? What is it that draws you?
Dr. Knight, you're in?
Sure. My answer is going to be pretty quick and easy. It's pace. So if I want story to happen with some gaming elements, with some narrative elements, I think I'm kind of down the middle of the road in my tastes. I want some of both. But like BX gives me the pace of gaming that is right for the game that I want to play. So there's not so much number crunching and accounting and ledger filling going on. There's no encumbrance tracking. Some people would love that, but it slows things down. I like quick combat, so I'm going to do like initiative or side-based initiative. These are the kind of rules that fit for a faster game. And so if you like a faster game, you probably want fewer rules. And if you're okay with a slower game, you might want more rules.
That makes sense. So I've been playing OD&D a lot, and I went there because of the simplicity, where something where I can usually tell people when they look at a spell, I say, well, it does exactly what you think it does. There's not a lot of detail, it's not a lot of, you look at it, it does the thing you think it does. Because of that, it allows the players to be more creative, it allows me to be, I don't have to change rules because there's not a rule there, right? I can just kind of look at it and go, this works, and then we can really flow and play a more kind of natural, almost a story game, but not,
I'm not falling for it.
Come over, please.
For me, BX was the game of my youth. It was the first game I played, and then having gone through and played all the other editions, now I played OD, but back then it just started with BX forward, just rediscovering that it was beyond nostalgia how much I really liked the simplicity and the easiness and just the flow that I can achieve with those rules, and I really haven't found much of a need to ditch it for anything else. I think it kind of gives me pretty much what I'm looking for. Yeah.
I mean, I'll continue on the BX hype train with it. It's kind of the lingua franca of like the old school gaming side now. It's one that most people have some contact with, even if it's with a modded version, a hacked version of the game. They'll have some attachment to it, and it's modular enough that you can swap stuff out easy. So I like it for simplicity, and it's got enough rules that I can get through almost anything, and it's modular enough that I can add in what I want. So.
Yeah, I'm of two minds. I mean, I love AD&D First Ed for the nuance, but I've also come to realize that not all players buy into that nuance. So I equally love Old School Essentials BX because that I can bring in more casual players and everybody can have a good time. But then when I find and vet those people who are good and can buy into the AD&D nuance, then I know we can assemble that really good group. Because the experience that AD&D gives when you put all those little fiddly rules that people like to chuck out the window, but you put them together and use them, and it's like, oh wow, it's an experience. It's really interesting. That's why I stick with that.
It's sort of a junkie dealer thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, get you hooked on this one, and come on, kid.
I'm a pusher.
First one's free.
Well, for me, my current favourite game is probably Call of Cthulhu, and I love it because for a horror game to work, you've got to, the rules have not got to get in the way of the atmosphere. The resolution's got to be quick. Call of Cthulhu is very, very quick. It's immediate, and the characters are incredibly fragile. That fragility has to be there for horror to work, and it does all of that. And there's nothing about Call of Cthulhu that gets in the way of the feel you want.
Surprisingly, as a dirty, filthy story gamer, my game of choice is basic role-playing, BRP. And the reason why is I spent years playing every version of D&D I could and every other fantasy game I could, looking for the game that did what I wanted, because for me, setting trumps rules, character trumps rules, and story trumps rules. And BRP was the only game that gave me a set of rules, like John just said with Call of Cthulhu, which uses them, that gets the heck out of the way and lets the players be good at what they're good at and do what they want to do and roll dice to find that resolution without having to go, well, actually, hang on, there's this, and oh, wait, there's that. Like, no, it just goes, it plays, it's great. So for me, perfect level of mid-crunch and get the F out of the way of my story or out of my game or out of my players' heads.
Right. I'm probably in a similar place with the BACME as the BX folks have talked about, and really not far off, even though it's crunchier than what you're talking about, because BACME has more rules than BX. I mean, it was a sort of a further development of it. One of the things I love about that edition, though, is how it's introduced. You get the basic book, and it is basic, and you don't get weapons mastery. You know, you're not getting ship-to-ship combat. It's not all. You could go get the rules encyclopedia, and there it all is, and probably in a more convenient format. But I loved the inconvenience of BACME. That you just got enough, you know, you have a baby has breast milk, here you go. You know, the baby starts getting older, now you're gonna give him the wheat, you know, the little mixture of and then you're gonna have the baby num-nums now, the baby shut-ups, you know, the little cookies you give them.
Stop describing modern players like that. They might have taken it.
Hey, we're trying to get another generation, and you gotta start young, you know, as you build up to the things, and even to the point that the monsters you get in the basic set, with the possible exception of dragons, by the time your players are at third level, they ought to be able to defeat those monsters. Dragons will probably take half of them out, but you know, and so you even get the monsters that are appropriate for that level, and the fact that, to be perfectly honest, as Todd said, it was the one that I had as a kid, and I know it inside out. Sometimes more out than in, and I'm comfortable enough now to say, we'll chuck that. That's not. I don't want that. We'll add this in. Yeah. Just to the last bit, are there questions from anyone for this august panel of knowledgeable graybeards? Not to say that.
I got one.
Yeah.
Question to these guys. Do you think stats make the character? And if the answer is no, would you mind in a D&D or D&D context someone playing a character with 3 or 4 18?
I think they absolutely should make the character. I think it's the job of the player to look at those stats. They don't define every aspect of the character's personality, but they should lead the player into picking factors that fit the stats. You can't put an 8, if 4d6 rearrange for AD&D, for example, you can't put 8 on dexterity and then claim to be a gymnast. I will say no, you're not going to do that.
I identify as a gymnast.
Well, there you could do it like, I'm a gymnast and I'm a terrible gymnast.
I'm the worst gymnast ever.
You can claim to be whatever you want. The dice will contradict you soon enough based on
That's
your
what compared
ability.
with all 18s. I can kill you if you're all 3s, I can kill you if you're all 18s, I don't care what you got.
I think your
But
equipment,
you have, you have a good point of like, what if I want to play a character with a low stat, and he's a goofball?
Yeah.
Right, that doesn't really matter either, does it?
The best wizard I ever saw in D&D had a 9 intelligence. And my buddy played him like he was the most overconfident, he would pomp his way into rolling for spell knowledge checks, right? Second edition, do I know this spell? He would fail so often, so he had like 3 spells, and he's like, I'm the great and wise, it's amazing.
So I can realize how many braggarts do you know who think they can do anything but their actual, right?
sorry. I think
I
it's,
wasn't gonna call you out, but, you know,
I think the equipment almost matters more, like what the character has on them, what they're capable of doing at any point in time. The stats are a guideline, but what a character has on hand and what the player can think of to do with that stuff is really what's making the character more than, I got a 16 on this or I got a 17 on that. If you don't have anything to do, then great, your stats are going to get you so far.
Yeah.
An idiot that has a whole bunch of ball bearings that let them down through the hall, going to probably succeed much better than the guy who's got 18 but standing there naked. You have to have stuff with you to get something done.
Last year, the game that I ran last year, was General Nut played a wizard, and they were second level, so he's got a couple of spells, but Beckme wizards at low levels kind of feel useless. But he decided that he had a bucket and he was going to throw this bucket at people, and it was hilarious.
it kept working.
It kept working too. That was the thing. His die rolls went with it, and it was fun and engaging and silly and funny and worked. And then last night, throw the oil. Sean rolls a 20 and hits the spider with oil. There's oil all over the spider. And Phil's going to throw a torch to light the spider on fire. And he rolls, and you see it pause at 20, and then tips to 2. Torch goes wild. It was probably the best moment of the night. It's a silly thing happening.
I mean, ultimately, yes, stats are meaningful, but they're not the be-all and the end-all. But I think they're definitely great for informing character choices as well.
Well, I also think it depends on the game, right? To do that depends question, right? Like if you look at, let's say BX or Beckme, you're playing a thief. It doesn't matter if you have a low dex. You get, well, no, maybe in Beckme it doesn't. You get the same percentage in pick
Yeah, you
box.
do.
But if you're playing, like say 5th edition, where it's based on your dexterity and your proficiency in the thieves tools, it does matter. So it depends on the game, right? If you think it's funny to play a 9 wizard in AD&D, but you play a 9 wizard in 5e and you fail every spell you're trying to cast, that's gonna suck, right? So I think it matters depending on the system. That's the way I look at that. In most old school games, not so much.
So the live chat here is, they would like to ask a question. This comes from Minnie Warmut. Minnie Warmut asks, do you have a favorite post-apocalyptic / future kind of modern game? If so, which game do you recommend for a newbie?
I think he has an answer.
The Hateful Place.
Hateful Place.
The Hateful Place, it's like the best post-apocalyptic game ever. It's super simple, done. The creator's amazing, it's also cheap, it's like $4 on drive-thru. There you go. That's my, anybody else?
I mean, D&D itself is kind of a post-apocalyptic
Well,
game.
Look at it that way.
Can be,
Yeah, you can have your fighter and magic user, etc., come across a half-buried Statue of Liberty.
Right.
You bastards!
Hey, you got something over here?
Earlier we were talking about how many rules you need, and you were saying like how many you need to create the experience. But if you want the experience to be easy to replicate, or even possible to replicate, is there a difference there? And the reason I ask is I was running a game using the original Black Hack, the 16 pages of rules for kids, and they loved it. But, as Daniel was saying, 40 years of gaming experience, the rules kind of grew out of what they wanted. They wanted pets. I made up rules for pets on the fly. Like, that game that we were playing didn't exist anywhere. They couldn't replicate it with the 16 pages of rules. So, what do you think as far as creating an experience versus replicating an experience, and how many rules are needed?
Well, I think
Gygax played D&D. Gygax played his own game. Like, I think there's a stop worrying about what the system is and make it, it's your table. That's what happened at your table. That's your game. And your players will go away and say, oh, I came to this table and it was great. I don't know if they have to go and say, I played the Black Hack and then hope to get the same thing. It should be, that's the experience you're curating, rather than a rulebook making it. The DM is curating that experience.
I think what you're aiming for there, though, is quite frankly impossible.
Yeah.
Because so much of the experience at the table depends on who's at the table.
Yeah.
In that everybody is different. Every player is different. Every DM is different. Different interpretations, different ideas. And I'm sorry, but I think it's impossible. I think you can't do it.
Even with the same consistent group, your experience
No,
will
it's gonna be
evolve.
consistent. Yeah. So like, watch Groundhog Day, right? Like, seriously, watch Groundhog Day and watch him try to recreate the romance with Andy McDowell by going through the exact same events over and over, but it doesn't play out the same way every time. Every experience is gonna be new. So yeah, the kids didn't play Black Hack, they played Dave's game.
Right.
That's worth 1,000 times more than playing the Black Hack.
Yeah,
No, I was
And for
just gonna
people
say-
younger than Bear, maybe 50 First Dates.
I'm sorry, what?
Reference.
50 First Dates.
Sorry, what was that?
I don't know. I didn't hear it
Am I the
either.
oldest? Oh my God.
I didn't hear it either. I don't know that movie he was referring to.
I don't like Dave anymore.
How is this ancient movie?
I was just gonna say, I think it's actually a danger. I think you end up trying to write rules like 5e does, because you're trying to replicate something they can't replicate. And even with 5e having trying to write things to box you in as much as possible, you can still go look at the really big streamers. And like Dimension 20's game doesn't run like Critical Role's game, doesn't run like somebody else's game, even with rules that are trying to tie you down as much as possible.
Before I was a priest, I was a stage actor, and the biggest poison for any night's performance was to try to do it like last night.
Oh, dear God.
Like last night was great, let's try to do that again.
I know.
And you're talking about the same stage direction, the same words on the page, and you've got the same props, and it has to be, you have to keep it the same or the stage manager will ride you afterward. Why did you change this, But still in all, within that structure where you're doing the same thing night after night, it has to be new. So you can't say, oh, I want to do it just like last night, except in those mechanics that you can't take Shakespeare words, like, I don't like that sentence, I'll put something else in. But other than things like that, you are creating something new because the audience is different, because, one of the cast members had a lousy lunch and is just a little off or a little on, and so, yeah, it's magic. The other answer, though, that you typically would get now is, well, write your own edition and put it on Drive-Thru RPG.
Everyone else has.
Everyone else has.
Yeah, I've got enough copies of BX already, so.
No, we need one more.
This one will do it.
Someone will make the magic VX that is the one true VX for us all.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Give them a round of applause for their insight. And thank you, everyone who's watching out there in YouTube land.
It's a land now?
Yeah, why not?
Oh my God.
The kingdom of sincerity.
The kingdom of YouTube.
Closing it out?
Yeah.
So, trying to.
All right, thanks. Thanks for
Have you ever 36 cake? They're like,
Well, that's sort of like, I think we're talking about the joke of, I'm not an actor, I'm a film star. I'm not an actor, I'm a film star. Part of it is, it's like, a joke under it is that.
no, but you're not an actor. So you're on the stage, right? I must, to the room, now, we must go.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm on camera.
But even, I heard that it was yeah, you got coverage shots.
I built team.
Oh, okay, you want to make games like